All right, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to talk a little bit about web application security, and much like the previous video when we talked about or introduced MVC, the whole goal here really is just to kind of introduce it as a concept and provide you with some resources moving forward. As a web application developer, I'd feel a little remiss if I didn't at least point some of these things out. I know that when I first started off, application security, web application, or just software security in general, wasn't something that was hit upon real. There wasn't a lot of focus on it at the undergraduate level, and so I just want to make sure that you guys are at least aware of some of the terminology and some great resources, great places to go in order to get started. Probably the number one thing, at least for me, that was been a benefit in my career is finding out about OWASP. The acronym stands for Open Web Application Security Project, and while it has web in the name of the acronym, in the name of the organization, it is not just limited to web. A lot of great resources, a lot of great documentation, processes, policy, procedure, as well as tools to get started. And so go to the homepage and just poke around. From the homepage, you'll see we're on one of the projects that we're on. These are really kind of the biggest projects that they have, some of the more popular projects that they have. And the top 10, which you can see here, is the one that I just wanted to take a few minutes here to talk through. Top 10, 2013, so it's a little bit dated. They usually update this every 2 to 4 years, I think. And what they go through is that and again, I don't know their exact process here, but they compile a list of top application security flaws and then discuss them here in the top 10 list. So number 1 is injection. Number 2 is broken auth and session management. Number 3 is cross-site scripting. And so you can go through here and you can see what are the top 10 application vulnerabilities. Why I think something like this is a great resource is because, especially if you've never thought about these before, if you don't know anything about really application security, this is a great place to start because these are the top issues that you'll run into. Take a look at, let's say, for example, that we want to look at injection. And we'll look at a sample intentionally vulnerable web application here in order to look at injection, in particular SQL injection. You can choose any of these topics, and then you get kind of a high-level, almost bulleted list type of a breakdown. What is the threat? Where does it come from? Is exploitation easy? What are the weaknesses? What are the impacts? How do you prevent? How do you determine if you're vulnerable? Some attack scenarios, and then a lot of references here. And so going through these and then reading it and following these references becomes a great way to learn more about any of these particular vulnerabilities, right? And so you can just go down the list and work through all these. And again, definitely don't have time to cover them in the course, but it was something I would encourage you to do moving forward in your career. Outside of the top 10, one of the things that you need to do then for yourself is, if you want to learn about these, you need to set up a safe environment to do that. You can't just go, SQL injection, I wonder how that works, and decide to go to usd.edu and look for SQL injection vulnerabilities. You'll get in trouble. People will go to jail. You could go to jail over that. So you need to have a lab. If you don't have authorization, if USD is not giving you authorization to test their site, then you can get in trouble. And so what you can do then is you can set up a safe environment, a lab. You can use some VMs in order to do that. A common place to start is called Kali Linux. Kali has a lot of tools that are available for kind of security people in general. But it has some of the applications or some of the tools that I just want to point out here through this video. And so Kali, if you go to the downloads, you have a couple of options here. You can download an ISO and you can set up a VM, much like we did at the beginning of the semester. Definitely an easier option is to download a VMware image. And so if you scroll down just a little bit further, you can see that there is this link to the Offensive Security Kali Linux ARM page, ARM and whatever. And here you can download an actual VM. And what this allows you to do then, it's a little bit larger, of course, but the VM's already set up. And so you download it, you extract it. Inside of that folder, there's a VMX file. You just double click and run, and then you're done. And so it's a lot easier. You don't have to go through the install and everything like we did at the beginning of the semester. In order to get that to work then, you can see that here's my Kali Linux. I just downloaded that VM. Inside of that is a bunch of files. You find the VMX file. it's one of these guys here. I think this might be it. Or you just open it up using VMware Player. And so that's what I've done here, is I've opened it using VMware Player. All right, so from there, you can play it just like we have our other virtual machine, and we're good to go. Now, Kali Linux has a lot of tools on here, and really the same thing applies. It's very tempting to go and find some of those tools and think that they might be fun to run against the target, but if you don't have permission, don't run the tools. And so if you want to learn more about other things that are on here, you need to set up a safe environment, which is beyond the scope of what we need to talk about. So just be careful, I guess, is the takeaway there. All right, so eventually this will launch. And from here, I'm going to close those tabs out because I don't need them. You'll have a clean desktop. I use this VM for a couple of things here, and so there's some information. And let's see, but you should have a clean desktop. It is a Linux distribution, so it's going to have Linux-like qualities, behaviors. You're going to have all of the tools available here under Kali Linux. And again, most of these, 99.9%, we're not going to even talk about. There's only one that I want to point out, and we'll go through that here in just a moment. All right, so Kali Linux is a great place then to set up our first lab because it has one of the tools I want to talk about, and it's just kind of a general security distribution. The next one then is the application itself. So we've been talking about web applications, and in order to explore or learn more about those particular vulnerabilities, then we need to have an application that we know that they exist in, so that we can try to find them and try to figure out how a bad guy, an attacker, would find those and exploit those. So DVWA is an application that does that. It's an intentionally vulnerable application, and so you need to be careful that once you get this installed in a VM, that you're running it in a safe place, and that you're only leaving that VM up and running for the time that you actually need it. This is intentionally vulnerable, and so if there's other malware on your network and they get a hold of this, see that this application's up and running, that might cause you issues. So again, you just kind of got to be careful. Not a big deal, but just be a little bit careful. DVWA. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to download that. We'll do that. You can download it this way as a zip file, and then much like Mini and WordPress and Drupal, you can set up the site using that, extracting this folder and setting up a website just like we've done. There is an easier way, in that I have an installation script that I have created and made available at this link. All of these links are available in our readings section of our tentative schedule, so you'll be able to find all of that there. With this script then, what this script will do is you can read the script here. It's going to download DVWA. It's going to create the website. It's going to create the database. It's going to do all of that for us, and so that we don't have to do that ourselves. All right, so inside of Kali then, this is the icon for your browser. It's up here. It's called Iceweasel. I don't have the URL handy, so I was just trying to get that through Google. There it is. All right, so what you can do then is right above where the script itself is, I've provided a link to it. And so you can right-click and save this page as, save it to your desktop, and then just call it install_dvwa.sh. And that already exists on my desktop, so whatever, I can replace it. I'll go ahead and close Iceweasel. You can see that there's that file on my desktop, and if we open up with the text editor like LeafPad, that's just all the code that's available on that website. What we want to do then is we want to run this. And so the quickest way to do that is to go to Terminal. We'll change to our desktop, and I want to make sure that the permissions are set to execute. So how we do that on Linux is we say chmod and then the permissions, 755 in this case. That'll give us execute permissions and the name of the file that we want to change. From there we can check. Right, you can see ls-l. that gives us these groupings: read, write, execute, read, execute, and read, execute. And so 755 told that to set all of these bits, only these two, and only these two, right? So read, write, execute, read, execute, read, execute. So it's got execute permissions. Right, from there, we just have to do /install dvwa.sh, and then that'll run that script. And if everything works for you, then what you'll see is it'll take just a little bit to do the cleanup, and it'll launch DVWA right there, open your browser and everything. So it should make that quite a bit easier between downloading the VM in Kali and then running that install script. It should make it a pretty painless installation. From there, you have an intentionally vulnerable application that you can learn some of those topics from the top 10 on in order to help you write more secure code. To access the application, it is admin password that logs you in. And then there's a couple or there's one thing that you need to do right off the bat, and that is the security setting. And so once you get logged into the application, there's a link down here, DVWA security. And you can see this is information about your current session. Security level is set to high. So if you do DVWA security, select low and click submit. Don't forget to click submit, because what we want to do is you want to see that the security level is set to low. Something that's very nice about this application is that it has that security setting. And so as you figure out how any of these tasks, any of these exercises work at a low setting, then you can go back and change it to high and try to figure out high, and then you can go back and change it to or medium and then go to high. And so it kind of grows with you as you learn a little bit more about any particular topic. It's good when you get interested in security or start learning security, most courses start with the offensive. And that in order to understand how to defend against it, you have to learn how the attacks happen. And so you'll have to excuse me here for just 1 second. All right, so it grows with you, which is a nice feature. Most of these topics then, will match up to the top 10. So we talked about injection, and they have a section here to learn about SQL injection. You come to the site, and you can start poking around to learn more about SQL injection. Now, this isn't tutorial based. And so you just this is vulnerable to it. That's all you know right now. And so if you have absolutely no idea where to start with SQL injection, well, that's where the top 10 comes in. Go back to that top 10 list, learn more about injection, follow those references, read more about it, and then come back here and try to apply what you've learned in order to figure out how this is vulnerable. Another nice feature with this application is that if you scroll down to the bottom, you have this view source button. And viewing the source then will show you not the actual source of the entire page, but the source of the function of the code that is vulnerable. And so you can look at here, and you can, if you're not really sure, you can study the examples, you can study those references, and then take a look at the source code, and you should be able to, figure out where the vulnerability exists. In this case, SQL injection. This is like the classic problem with SQL injection, right? Since we're on it, more information. Right, again, more places to go and read, and this is a great place to get started then. I would encourage you as a developer, regardless if you're going to do web or not. Most of these are web related, but I would start learning about these, and it takes time. There's a lot of material here, but you need to be well versed in security, the security of your application, in order to keep your clients, keep the customers, keep your data safe. What can you do with a vulnerability like this? Well, if you put in a single tick and click submit, you'll see that an error is generated. And what's happening then is that the user supplied input, right, this text box, user ID, what the application is doing and where the vulnerability exists is the fact that it's taking that user supplied input and it's concatenating it directly into the SQL statement. And so when we have a string value in SQL statement, just like when we have in any programming language, see we have a double quote and a double quote. They have to match up. They come in pairs. Same with this SQL statement. So we're using that single quote inside of that SQL statement in order to indicate that this is a string value. If I inject a single quote, I've thrown that balance off. So now there is an open and a close. The close coming from $ID, which is the query string value, which is the user supplied input. and it's leaving this one right here open. So there's 3 single quotes. The reason that's a problem is because the application is directly using, that's concatenating that user supplied input directly into the statement. And so it's not handling that safely. That vulnerability then allows me to change that SQL statement. Right? Let's say that I search for a value of 1, click submit. I see I get 1 result. If I do a single quote, we know that that gives us the error page. Well, what if I say single quote, which if we go back and look at the source, I need to stop closing that. That single quote allows us to escape the SQL right here. So if I'm escaping it, then I can inject my own SQL statement. So I could say or 1 equals 1, and then a hashtag. And what this is doing then is it's changing this condition. It's saying where user ID equals nothing or 1 equals 1. It's a logical OR. So only one of those conditions need to be true. And so the effect that that has on that query is to return essentially all columns, not all columns, but all records inside of that database. This additional single quote then, that's what, when we put that single quote originally, that's what generated that syntax error. And so what this hashtag does then is it's a comment character that comments out the rest of the statement. And so that is our way in this injection and making sure that that trailing single quote isn't a problem. It doesn't generate a syntax error. So now if we do that, click submit, you can see we get no syntax errors, plus we get all the data from that table, right? And from there, DBWA is a relatively popular application. You can go through and you can see that how you could dump, you could enumerate the rest of the database, you could find passwords, you could dump data, you could crack passwords. There's all sorts of things you can do from here. So really great place to start. Of all of these, if you had to choose, if I had to recommend, I'm going to recommend, I would start with SQL injection, and then I would also start with cross-site scripting. Those are going to be the 2 that are going to be the most prevalent and probably the most beneficial to learn right away. Let's see how we're doing on time. Not too bad. Right, so for cross-site scripting, we can take a look at that one real quick. Again, you're going to need to spend more time reading about it. This is just a real basic introduction. But the problem with cross-site scripting is we're looking for the ability to send to the application and JavaScript to get it to reflect back and execute in the browser. And so if we look at this application, we type in our name here, so Josh, and click submit. You can see that what I typed in was reflected back in the response, right? We typed in the value, we clicked submit, that generated our HTTP request. The value came in the URL string, so that was a GET request, and it was reflected back in the HTTP response. And so if we look at that value, so let's inspect that element, you can see there's our response. Hello, Joshua. All right, so the problem lies in that what if we did JavaScript? Right, well, how does the application handle that? So I type in a script tag. I say script, and then inside of that script, I just do some sort of, in this case, a proof of concept. That is an alert box. If the application is vulnerable, we'll have alert, we'll have a pop-up. If it's not vulnerable, we won't have an alert box. And so we click submit, and we can see that that pop-up occurred. And so what happened was that we sent in the URL that script tag, and the application sent back that script tag. So that as that was reflected user supplied input, when the browser executed that script or received this HTML, it got to that script tag and it executed that as JavaScript. That's a problem. Right. The alert here in this case is relatively benign. It's a proof of concept. If you can get this to happen when you're testing an application, whether it's yours or somebody else's, there's a problem. Proof of concept. We're not doing anything malicious. But if we wanted to be malicious, we could add all sorts of things inside of here using JavaScript to install malware, to generate additional requests, to modify forms, to steal cookies, to do all sorts of bad things. And so that's where it becomes a pretty big issue, a really big problem. We can do it in a way that users would never know or never understand. And so the whole purpose behind cross-site scripting, there's 2 categories, reflected and stored. The whole purpose then is to get other users to execute JavaScript on your behalf. I'm the attacker. I want to send this link to you, But let's say that this code inside of here, instead of being an alert box, is code to steal your session so that I can hijack your whatever your account you're on. So I send that link to you, I put it in a spam email, and I try to get you to click it so that when you follow that link, you go to that site, you think that this website you're going to is legit. Maybe it's usd.edu, and when you go there, then you make the request to usd.edu. It sends a response with my script, and that script executes on your behalf. It executes in your browser and steals your cookies, sends them back to me. That way I can steal your token. Right? There's a lot going on there, right? And so getting into security, you have to start. It takes some time. It took me quite a bit of time poking around OWASP and playing with tools and learning in environments like this before I really understood how everything fit together. And so again, the purpose of these last couple of demos weren't to be an exhaustive or even really an introduction to SQL injection or to Crosssite scripting, but just to give you a place to start and a way to get started, right? So that's, again, really brief, but a little bit about those two. These are a great place to start: OWASP, Kali, and DVWA. So if you want to get that environment set up, again, it's not required for any portion of the course here, but if you want to get that set up and you're running into any issues, let me know. I can help you out. Otherwise, make sure to just kind of bookmark this and use it in the future. So with that, 20 minutes here, really not a lot of time on security, but this is a great place to start. So with that, I will stop the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.